The text message arrived at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me from sleep with its brutal simplicity. I can't marry someone who's been lying to me for months. Don't contact me again. I stared at my phone screen in the darkness of my childhood bedroom, reading Ryan's words over and over until they burned into my retinas. My wedding dress hung in the closet behind me, tags still attached, scheduled for final alterations in 3 days. The venue was booked, the invitations sent. Our families were flying in from across the country, and my fiancé had just called off our engagement via text message. Because of lies I'd never told, what I didn't know that night in 2011 was that my parents had spent months systematically poisoning the man I loved against me. What I wouldn't discover for another 14 years was that every lonely holiday, every failed relationship, every therapy session trying to understand why I couldn't trust my own heart had been orchestrated by the two people who were supposed to protect me most. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm a 36-year-old family law attorney who specializes in parental alienation cases. The irony would be laughable if it weren't so devastating. For over a decade, I've helped clients navigate the destruction caused by manipulative family members, never suspecting I was living the textbook example of their tactics. The confession came exactly 14 years later, delivered over Sunday brunch like my mother was commenting on the weather. When are you going to give us grandchildren? You're almost 40 and I'm getting too old to enjoy being a grandmother. I set down my mimosa with deliberate precision, the familiar sting of her guilt trip washing over me. For years, I deflected these questions with excuses about my career, about focusing on my law practice, about not finding the right person. Maybe if you hadn't destroyed my engagement to Ryan, I'd already have children, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Mom's face went pale. Dad suddenly found his eggs fascinating. The silence stretched between us like a live wire. We did what we thought was best, Mom said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. What you thought was best? Something cold settled in my stomach. What exactly did you do? Dad cleared his throat, still not meeting my eyes. We may have shared some concerns about Ryan with you, about whether he was right for you at such a young age. You didn't share concerns with me. Ryan broke up with me because he thought I was cheating on him. Where did he get that idea? The silence that followed was deafening. We told him we'd seen you with other men, Mom admitted, her words tumbling out in a rush. We showed him pictures of you having lunch with that law school friend, David. We thought if Ryan believed you weren't serious about the relationship, he'd end it naturally and you wouldn't have to make the difficult choice yourself. The room tilted sideways. You told my fiancé I was cheating on him. You fabricated evidence. And because Marcus was struggling so much with dating, Dad added, as if this somehow justified their actions. It seemed unfair that you were getting married first when he was older and still single. I stared at them in absolute horror. They destroyed the most important relationship of my life because they thought I was too young at 22, and because my older brother, now 38 and finally married last year, had been struggling with his love life. Do you understand what you've done to me? My voice was steady, controlled, but underneath I was screaming. I've spent 14 years in therapy. I've lost count of the relationships that ended because I can't trust anyone. I've built my entire career around helping people recover from family manipulation, never knowing I was the victim of it myself. Look how successful you've become, Mom said desperately. You have that beautiful office, all those important clients. You never would have achieved so much if you'd gotten married and had babies at 22. The lawyer in me was already cataloging their admissions, documenting each confession with the precision that had made me one of Phoenix's top family attorneys. But the daughter in me was breaking apart, finally understanding why every romantic relationship since Ryan had felt like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began writing everything I could remember from their confession. By morning, I had the foundation for what would become the most personal case of my career. The private investigator I hired found Ryan Callahan, now Ryan Thompson, in exactly 3 weeks. He was living in Seattle with his wife Sarah and their twin daughters, working as a successful architect. Looking at his LinkedIn profile, seeing the life he'd built without me should have hurt. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Determination. The letter I sent was carefully crafted. Dear Ryan, I recently learned information about our 2011 relationship that I believe you deserve to know. My parents have admitted to telling you that I was unfaithful during our engagement. This was completely false. They showed you fabricated evidence because they felt I was too young for marriage, and because my older brother was struggling with dating at the time. I'm not writing to disrupt your life, but to offer you the truth you deserved 14 years ago. I hope knowing this brings you some peace as it has begun to for me. Sincerely, Elena. His call came a week later while I was reviewing briefs in my corner office at Hartwell and Associates. Elena. His voice was exactly as I remembered. Deep, warm, but now strained with emotion. I got your letter. Hi, Ryan. I wasn't sure you'd want to talk. I need you to know what your parents did to me, he said, his words coming in a rush. They didn't just tell me you were cheating. They showed me photographs, gave me details about your supposed other relationships, convinced me you were only marrying me to make some other guy jealous. My heart clenched. The photographs were from my study sessions with David Chen for the bar exam. There was never anyone else, Ryan, never. I know that now. His voice broke. God, Elena, I loved you so much. When they showed me those pictures, when they told me you'd admitted to having doubts about our marriage, it destroyed me. I couldn't eat for weeks. I couldn't trust another woman for years. We talked for 3 hours that first day, piecing together the systematic campaign of lies my parents had waged. They'd told Ryan I was too career-focused to be a good wife, that I'd confided in them about finding him boring and too predictable, that I was already planning to cheat after we were married. The worst part, Ryan said, was how confused you looked when I confronted you. I thought you were an incredible actress. You genuinely had no idea what I was talking about, did you? None, I whispered. I thought you'd lost your mind. Over several more conversations, Ryan shared how our broken engagement had affected his subsequent relationships. He'd struggled with trust issues for years, going through intensive therapy before he could commit to his now wife, Sarah. I told Sarah about you, he admitted, about how much I'd loved you and how badly it ended. She always said she suspected there was more to the story than I knew. While I was reconnecting with Ryan and processing the full scope of my parents' deception, my brother Marcus called with his own revelation. Elena, I need to tell you something, he said, his voice heavy with guilt. I knew what Mom and Dad were doing to Ryan. Not all of it, but I knew they were trying to break you up. You knew? The betrayal cut even deeper. They told me they were protecting you from making a mistake, that you'd thank them later. I was so messed up about being single while my younger sister was getting married that I let them do it. I even gave them ammunition sometimes. Told them when you seemed stressed about wedding planning or when you mentioned Ryan being clingy. Marcus broke down then, admitting he'd been in therapy for 2 years, dealing with the guilt and shame of his role in my destroyed engagement. Our parents' favoritism toward him had been its own prison, creating pressure to succeed at everything while watching them tear down my happiness to protect his ego. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for years," he sobbed. "Every time you'd mention being lonely or talk about another failed relationship, I knew it was partly my fault." The conversation lasted 4 hours, both of us crying and processing decades of family dysfunction. Marcus revealed other instances of our parents' manipulation, times they'd sabotaged my friendships with people they deemed inappropriate, career opportunities they'd undermined because they conflicted with their vision of my life, even dates they'd scared away during my college years. "They convinced themselves they were protecting you," Marcus said. "But really they were controlling you, and I was complicit because it benefited me." Armed with admissions from both my parents and brother, plus Ryan's detailed account of their deception, I filed the most comprehensive family manipulation lawsuit Arizona had ever seen. The charges included intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, conspiracy, interference with prospective economic advantage, and violation of the newly expanded parental alienation statutes. The lawsuit demanded $300,000 in damages, $75,000 for therapy costs over 14 years, $45,000 for lost wedding deposits and related expenses, $80,000 for documented career setbacks during my emotional recovery periods, and $100,000 in punitive damages. But money wasn't my primary goal. I wanted acknowledgement, accountability, and assurance that they could never manipulate another person's life the way they'd manipulated mine. The papers were served during my parents' anniversary dinner, a gathering I'd attended countless times while quietly nursing my broken heart. This time I watched Dad's face drain of color as he read the summons. Mom's theatrical gasp as she realized the scope of legal consequences they faced. "You're suing your own parents?" Mom clutched her pearls. "After everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done to me," I corrected. "You systematically destroyed the most important relationship of my life through deliberate lies and fabricated evidence. The emotional and financial damages are quantifiable and ongoing." Marcus, who'd arrived early for moral support, stepped forward. "Mom, Dad, you need to understand what you actually did. You didn't save Elena from a bad marriage. You destroyed her ability to trust and love. I've watched her struggle for 14 years because of your manipulation." Their faces showed genuine shock. After years of congratulating themselves for saving me from early marriage, they were finally confronting the reality of what their interference had caused. The mediation session took place at my law firm, giving me home field advantage and the quiet support of colleagues who'd watched me build a career while struggling with inexplicable relationship failures. My parents arrived with Harold Fitzgerald, a family friend who practiced estate law and looked distinctly uncomfortable handling litigation. Across the polished conference table, they appeared older, smaller, weighed down by the magnitude of their actions, finally being exposed to scrutiny. Rebecca Martinez, our mediator, outlined my evidence with clinical precision. documented therapy records, Ryan's sworn statement detailing their lies, expert testimony about long-term psychological damage, financial records showing career impacts during my darkest periods, and phone records proving they'd contacted Ryan multiple times during the weeks before he ended our engagement. The photographs they showed Mr. Callahan were deliberately taken out of context. I explained, sliding evidence across the table. They followed me to lunch meetings with law school colleagues, photographed innocent interactions, and constructed elaborate narratives of infidelity to support their fabrications. Mom broke down crying when she saw the photos they'd used to convince Ryan I was cheating. Images of me studying with David, sharing professional meals with colleagues, even hugging a female friend goodbye after drinks. "We thought we were protecting you," she sobbed. "You were so young, so focused on your career. We were afraid marriage would derail your potential. So you decided to derail my emotional life instead?" I asked. "You stole 14 years of healthy relationships from me. You made me question my own sanity, my judgment, my worth as a partner." Dad, who'd remained silent through most of the proceedings, finally spoke. "Elena, we've watched you become this incredible attorney, this successful woman. Don't you think maybe things worked out for the best?" The question revealed everything wrong with their mindset. Even now, facing legal consequences for their manipulation, they were trying to justify their actions by pointing to outcomes they couldn't have predicted. "Success built on trauma isn't success," I replied. "It's survival. And I shouldn't have had to survive my own parents." The mediation stretched over 6 tense hours. My parents offered apologies laced with justification, explanations tangled with self-defense. They oscillated between remorse and rationalization, unable to fully accept the magnitude of their betrayal. "We just wanted the best for you," Mom repeated, her hands trembling. "The best would have been trusting me to choose my own path," I countered. Rebecca pressed them toward accountability, reminding them that settlement required acknowledgement of harm, not just regret. After several caucuses and whispered conferences with Harold, they finally conceded to a partial settlement. They agreed to pay $220,000 in damages. Less than my demand, but enough to cover therapy, career impacts, and a measure of punitive consequence. More importantly, they signed a binding agreement acknowledging their deception, promising to cease interference in my personal life, and committing to family therapy sessions facilitated by a court-approved counselor. Marcus volunteered to attend every session with me, determined to repair the damage of his complicity. "If I don't face this with you, then I'm still letting them off easy," he said. The court-ordered therapy began awkwardly. The first session saw Mom crying through introductions, Dad defensive and dismissive, Marcus racked with guilt, and me oscillating between rage and exhaustion. But as weeks turned into months, patterns emerged. We confronted the control dynamics that had defined our family. Dad's need for perfection, Mom's fear of losing influence, Marcus's burden of being the favored child, my role as the rebellious scapegoat. Each story, each memory revealed how our family system had thrived on manipulation disguised as protection. Breakthrough came when Mom admitted she hadn't just interfered with Ryan. She'd done similar things throughout my life, sabotaging friendships she disapproved of, withholding job opportunities she feared would take me too far from home, even intercepting letters from college friends she thought were a bad influence. "I thought I was keeping you safe," she whispered. "You were keeping me small," I replied. Dad, under pressure, confessed that much of his manipulation stemmed from unresolved trauma of his own. His sister's teenage pregnancy, his parents' bitter divorce, his lifelong fear of family shame. "I convinced myself I was sparing you from mistakes I'd seen destroy others," he said. "You destroyed me instead," I answered, my voice steady. The therapy sessions didn't heal everything. Some wounds were too deep, some trust too fractured. But the process created cracks in the fortress of denial my parents had lived behind for decades. By the 1-year mark, our relationship was functional, if not fully repaired. We could share meals without constant tension, discuss the past without explosive defensiveness, and even laugh occasionally at family memories untouched by betrayal. Ryan, now happily married with children, chose not to re-enter my life beyond supportive emails and occasional check-ins. "I'm glad you're finding healing," he wrote once, "but my life is here now. I wish you peace, truly." His absence was painful but necessary, a reminder that closure sometimes means accepting what cannot be restored. Through it all, I found strength in my career, my friendships, and my own resilience. The lawsuit, though emotionally brutal, gave me validation and accountability I'd never thought possible. It transformed my pain into precedent, my suffering into a shield for others who might face similar parental interference. In the end, I didn't get back the 14 years I lost, the marriage that never was, or the innocence of trusting my parents unconditionally. But I gained clarity, autonomy, and a voice louder than their lies. And perhaps, most importantly, I finally believed in my own worth, not as a daughter shaped by manipulation, but as a woman who rebuilt her life from truth.